Velez-Mitchell, JaneUnChained. So honored and delighted to have Los Angeles City Councilman Paul Koretz with us today. He is on a mission to create corridors to save wildlife. This is absolutely crucial. We are barreling toward extinction. I will show you some of the camera photos of this incredible wildlife here in Los Angeles. You can see them literally with the Hollywood sign in the background. These animals are under threat of a diminishing habitat. And so before we play a couple of videos that capture them in the wild, tell us, Councilmember Koretz, why you feel these corridors are the answer.
Well, most people think of LA as a concrete city of freeways, but they don't know that we have a majestic mountain range through the backbone of our city from Griffith Park to the ocean, and that we have deer and hawks and bobcats, foxes, rabbits, coyotes, and even mountain lions, which is very unusual. We're the only urban city in the United States in that circumstance, and the only urban city in the world except for Mumbai, India, where they have leopards living in the heart of the city. So we believe that we have a tremendous responsibility to protect them. And we realize that with all the building in the hillsides, that we're starting to cut off their roots to connect with each other, which are our wildlife corridors. And without that ability, they begin to inbreed. Our deer are already inbred, and eventually they will become extinct. So we are working to maintain the wildlife corridors that remain so that they continue to connect in the mountains, in the Santa Monica Mountains, but we're hoping this will eventually work its way west all the way to Ventura County, substantially easternly directions as well, and create a very substantial wildlife corridor and protect wildlife throughout LA and Ventura County.
Well, this is an incredible plan. Let us briefly take a look at some of the animals we are talking about. Now, what you're going to see now are captured on cameras. The animals don't know they're being photographed. These are essentially just like security cameras that you might have outside your home, but they capture these innocent, beautiful animals in the wild and really bring home why we should do everything we possibly can in order to save them. And this LA corridor idea is brilliant, if I must say so myself. That is absolutely beautiful. If you ever see me looking down, I'm sharing out this video because we want to let people around the world and in Los Angeles in particular know about this, because Councilman Koretz, you have sponsored so much pro-animal legislation. You are known as the animal-loving councilman. What happens in LA spreads to the rest of the world. So if a corridors and corridors, plural, are created here, that's going to encourage other urban areas to do the same, is it not?
Well, that's something we certainly like to do, is to start things in LA LA was ranked by the Guardian newspaper as the #1 most influential city in the world. And certainly a certain number of folks watch us and emulate the interesting things that we do. And hopefully this will be one of them. But our wildlife is unique, uniquely substantial for the middle of what's considered a concrete city. There's nothing like it in the United States, and we need to do what we can to protect it. And some of the camera shots that you've seen, they're in a hillside that was purchased by the community for exactly this purpose, to maintain a wildlife corridor and a very substantial wildlife habitat in one section of the Santa Monica Mountains. So they put up a camera there, and they've seen wildlife in some cases that they didn't even know was around. So we have some great shot of foxes, which most people don't know we have foxes in LA, that we have mountain lions in LA. The mountain lions, though, are borderline endangered. The Fish and Wildlife Department is considering making them an endangered species in this area. And so they are now somewhat protected, and we hope that this wildlife corridor plan will truly protect them in LA.
And wildlife the world over is under threat. We know that we are literally barreling toward extinction. The World Wildlife Fund and others have put out statistics that are really alarming. And some scientists say at the rate we're going, literally, we will have almost no wildlife vertebrates within much less than a decade. So what would you tell Angelenos and others to do? Obviously, developers look at land that is home to these beautiful, innocent animals as property to be developed. And so they're looking at it from, what can we do with this land to make money off of it? But often when you try to use land just as a resource, all the habitat on the land loses their home. And that's what's happening. The reason why animals are going extinct is they're losing their habitat. If you make them homeless, they're going to die. There's nowhere for them to go.
Well, this in some ways is more modest, because it won't stop all development. It just guarantees that when you look at building a home, you can't take the whole property. You've got to take a section and make sure there's a place for wildlife to traverse that area. So you can't fence it off entirely. You can't develop it entirely. You've got to have a section where they have the ability to travel. And I mean, that's not that much of a sacrifice. It's not that hard to plan a single family home in the hillsides without allowing some space for that. So I don't think it's that controversial. Even developers have not come out and blasted us for doing this. It's something they can work with us on. But it's important that we identify the critical places that they need to travel, and we make sure we set aside space for it. And it's even helpful in terms of firefighting, because it guarantees that there'll also be a place where firefighters can get to a location between homes, because the space has been left for animals, and it's also been left for them.
Well, yes, it's not an either or. It's not either it's good for people or it's good for animals.
No, it's a win-win for everybody.
If we destroy all wildlife, it's going to trigger an ecological collapse. That's not good for humans. Just like climate, it's not climate change or business. If we destroy the climate, that's not going to be good for business. So,
well, and there's one interesting thing that we've also been working on for a number of years, which you'll find interesting and relevant to what you were talking about. We've created an LA City biodiversity index. So if we want to save the species that are here, we first have to figure out what's here and where they are. And because we are such a rich area in terms of species, it's of critical importance that we identify them so we can save them. And Singapore was the first city to do a biodiversity index. I believe we're the second, and there's only 2 of us. But hopefully, if we know where our species are, it will assist us in keeping them all in living conditions that work, and they'll be able to continue to thrive.
Whoa, this is fascinating. So you're saying that the city of LA right now is cataloging where the wildlife is, and who's doing this? What agency? I'd love to know more about this.
Well, we're not totally there yet. But we are trying to catalog them. We're trying to identify them. We're working with biologists and the Center for Biological Diversity. We have a biologist on staff named Kat Superfiski, who it's been difficult to fund this project. That's been a battle. I'm not quite sure why, because it's universally applauded and has no opposition. But we've actually had to fund the biologists ourselves from my own very modest discretionary funds. But I'm pretty stubborn, so I won't let lack of funding be what stalls this. So we've had her on staff for a couple of years, and she's the one that has been the scientific brains behind our wildlife corridor plan, and is also helping to lead this.
Kat Superfiski. Wow.
Yeah, don't ask me to spell it. Her first name is K-A-T. You might want to talk to her at some point. She'd be very interesting to talk to on this subject.
I would absolutely love to talk to her, because if we find out where the biodiversity is and how much biodiversity we have, then we can protect it. Because
it's so remarkable. It's so remarkable. We even did a test, and we thought of, where is the least likely place where we can identify new species? So I think we went to the 8th floor patio, if I recall, of City Hall, and nothing visible there. But we used some microscopic equipment, and we found a variety of tiny wasps that had never been identified anywhere, micro wasps, which is just amazing. So everywhere you look, LA has so many species, and if we can't find them, we can't identify them. So we've had citizen biologists help us as volunteers, but it's an ongoing process. But a good concept. If we don't know what we have, we can't save it. And if we can't save it, we'll lose a lot of species without ever knowing that they were even here.
And the ramifications of what happens in LA spreads. If you're creating a biodiversity and wildlife index here in LA, then other municipalities will do it around the country. They do imitate Los Angeles. Let's take a look at some more of the footage of animals here in the city of Angels, right near iconic spots like the Hollywood sign. And they are roaming and captured as they roam. This is not staged in any way. This is just like security camera footage, and it shows you the intense wildlife we have here. So you can get involved with Claw. That's Claw Online. And the website is listed in the intro to this video. What else can people do to make this wildlife corridor idea that you have a reality?
Well, they certainly can call the City Council and encourage them to fully fund the wildlife corridor project. There's a lot more to do. And we're hoping that we go from a pilot, which is in the Santa Monica Mountains, mostly in my district and my neighboring council district, where Nithya Raman represents CD4. But there's a proposal by Adam Schiff and also within the City Council to create a rim of the valley, a wildlife area, and to include that as part of our wildlife corridor program. To add staff for that, we would have to make an addition to the mayor's budget, and there's an effort to do that. So far, it's not a sure thing. So if people would call the City Council and encourage them to fully fund the wildlife corridor program, that would be great.
I think a petition. I think we got to start a petition for this, because this is a great idea. And the fact that it's a wildfire mitigator too, and can prevent wildfires, my gosh. I almost literally became trapped in a wildfire a couple of years ago in Malibu when I was rescuing some animals, and the flames literally surrounded my car. I mean, the threat of wildlife is no longer hypothetical. People are losing their homes in LA and are living in fear of wildfires. So this is another reason to do this. I think we need a whole campaign to make this happen. Councilmember Koretz, I know you work with CLAW, which is Citizens for Los Angeles Wildlife. And how can we, I don't think the public is aware that this is happening.
No, I mean, we've done our best to let people know, but it's mostly through groups that care about wildlife and are sort of the insiders. I don't think, I mean, honestly, I don't think most LA residents even realize that we have this kind of wildlife. Growing up, to be honest, when I saw deer crossing signs and there magically appears a deer psychically, I always thought, why haven't they gotten rid of these signs? Deer don't exist anymore in LA. You know, once I grew up, I occasionally saw them, but who would believe that deer and foxes and mountain lions and bobcats are in Los Angeles? That's not our image, even to LA residents themselves.
I see so much wildlife. I saw 35 pelicans at the mouth of the Bayona wetlands just the other day and videotaped them having a great time, enjoying their habitat. I've also seen literally peacocks, foxes, egrets, all sorts of wildlife. Absolutely, we are, because as opposed to, let's say, Manhattan, where I was born and raised, this is a bunch of smaller communities linked together. So there is that space in between often where you have wildlife. Now, what you're talking about with the corridors, for people to visualize it, it's around where the 405 and the 101 meet. I know on one side you have Woodley Park. On the other side, you have sort of like the Galleria. Are you talking about the southwest side, the southwest corner of the 405 and the 101?
Well, that would be sort of the border of it. A lot of what we're talking about are the canyon areas between the valley and the west side. So Coldwater Canyon and Laurel Canyon, Beverly Glen, you know, all the different areas in the hillsides. Those are the heart of this, and we're hoping that development, which even during the period where we've started this effort over the last years, we've had developments that have gone in while we're trying to accelerate this effort and blocked some corridors. So it's getting tougher and tougher. It would only take a few key developments, a few key homes in the wrong places to really dramatically reduce the ability of wildlife to connect. And
Well,
if wildlife can't find
urgency.
each other and breed, this would be the beginning of the end.
Then there's an urgency to this.
Oh, there's a great urgency. We needed to do this, you know, five or 6 years ago when we began the effort, but it's still not too late. We absolutely can save our wildlife if we can put these corridors in now.
Councilmember Koretz, I want to thank you for all the incredible work you do for animals and people on the planet. And you are arguably the leading voice. There are others. You have a nice team of council members. I think you've convinced a lot of them, but you are arguably the leader for animals here in Los Angeles in the LA City Council. And anything we can do to help you achieve this goal, be very happy to get involved, because these animals cannot say, hey, you put up that fence, I have no water. You put up that fence, I have nowhere to go. I'm trapped and I'm going to die a slow death. Okay. And that's what's going to happen if we just allow mindless development without taking into consideration that these animals have every right to live on this earth as we do, and that we are really pushing them out of existence around the world. And guess who's going to pay the price along with these animals? The human race, because we cannot exist outside of the natural world. I remember when you gave an award to Jane Goodall, and I videotaped that at City Hall, and she said, we are part of the natural world. And if we have a toxic relationship and a disrespectful relationship with nature, we are going to pay a horrific price along with the animals. So thank you for all you do. Let's create these corridors for LA's wildlife. Let's not barrel any longer toward extinction. Let the city council know. And certainly, I think the time has come for a campaign. Again, thank you, Councilmember Koretz. And I appreciate you coming on JaneUnChained.
Hey, thank you so much, Jane, and for all your amazing work over the years for animals.
It's a team effort. Thanks again. Bye.
Take care.